Where are the room keys? My mother, Helen, stood in the marble lobby of the luxury hotel with one hand resting on her suitcase and the other already reaching toward me. My father, David, looked up at the chandelier and smiled. You actually went all out, Mirriam. Then Mom laughed. Well, I suppose you've finally learned that some occasions are actually worth celebrating. I stared at her. For years, whenever my birthday came around, those words had been completely different. Birthdays are a waste of time and money. No cake, no party, sometimes not even a happy birthday. But their anniversary, that was apparently different. Mom looked past me toward reception. So, what floor is our suite on? I tightened my fingers around the small envelope in my hand. There's something we're doing first. Her smile faded slightly. What? Dinner. I turned toward the private dining rooms before either of them could argue. What they didn't know was that I hadn't brought them to this hotel to give them the anniversary weekend they were expecting. I had brought them here because of something I'd discovered months earlier. And before tonight was over, everyone in my family was going to see it. I'm Mirriam Carter. I'm 27, and for most of my life, I was the daughter who made things easy. When Mom needed someone to organize Mother's Day dinner, I helped. When Dad wanted a Father's Day gift everyone could contribute toward, I handled it. Their anniversary dinners, I sent money. Restaurant deposits, I covered my share without complaining. Because whenever I hesitated, Mom had the same response. Family shows up for family, Mirriam. Yet somehow that rule disappeared every year when the calendar reached my birthday. By the time I was an adult, I'd stopped asking why. So when Mom announced their 30th anniversary and casually mentioned how wonderful a luxury hotel weekend would be, nobody expected me to answer. I'll arrange it. Mom had practically glowed. Now she and Dad followed me through the hotel, completely convinced I had finally decided to reward them. I opened the doors to the private dining room. My younger sister Rachel was already there. So were several relatives. Mom's expression brightened when she noticed the large television screen on the far wall. Oh, she said, you made us a slideshow. I didn't answer. I closed the doors behind us. Then I walked to the table and placed the envelope beside Mom's plate. She frowned. Mirriam, what's this? Later. I glanced toward the blank television. Because the first photograph that was about to appear wasn't from my parents' wedding. It was from a birthday party. And I had only one question left. What would my parents say when everyone in that room discovered birthdays had never been the problem? Before anyone sat down, Rachel caught my arm. Mirriam, can I talk to you? She pulled me into the hallway and glanced back at the closed dining room doors. What is going on? I studied her face. Did Mom and Dad ever tell you not to mention your birthdays around me? Rachel went completely still. That hesitation answered more than words could. Why would you ask me that? Because when I turned 18, I asked Mom for one homemade cake. She laughed and told me adults needed to grow out of attention-seeking traditions. Rachel looked away. When I turned 21, I bought myself cupcakes. Dad saw them and asked why I was wasting money. Mirriam. And on my 25th birthday, nobody called me until almost 10 that night. Mom didn't call to wish me happy birthday. She wanted me to help cover the deposit for their anniversary dinner. Rachel's shoulders dropped. I'd spent years believing this was simply how our family worked. Eventually, I'd stopped mentioning my birthday altogether. Then, a few months ago, everything changed. Rachel had been showing me photographs on her phone when she'd accidentally swiped one image too far. There she was, standing inside a restaurant with a cake in front of her. Mom stood on one side. Dad stood on the other. The date beneath the photograph had stayed in my head ever since. It came from a year when I'd been told our family was too busy and celebrations were too expensive. I looked at Rachel. How many birthday dinners were there? Her lips tightened. There were a few. A few. I thought you knew. I almost laughed. Knew what, Rachel? That birthdays suddenly stopped being a waste of money when they were yours. She lowered her voice. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Before she could answer, the dining room door opened. Mom stepped into the hallway. Her eyes moved between us. Seriously, Mirriam. What? We've been here 10 minutes, and you're already dragging up old nonsense. Rachel started. Mom. No, Mom raised her hand. Tonight is about your father and me. Mirriam invited us here for our anniversary, so whatever little grievance this is can wait. Little grievance. Years of being ignored had just been reduced to 2 words. But this time, I didn't argue. You're right, I said. Mom blinked. Then I walked past her. Back inside, Dad was telling my aunt that we'd probably have breakfast overlooking the city the next morning. I crossed the room without saying a word. Mom followed me. Mirriam, what are you doing? I picked up the remote. Rachel appeared in the doorway behind her. And before anyone could stop me, I pointed it at the television and pressed the button. The screen came alive. The first photograph filled the screen. Rachel was 19, sitting behind a chocolate birthday cake while Mom leaned over her shoulder and Dad held up a wrapped gift. Nobody spoke. Mom's face changed instantly. Mirriam. I pressed the remote again. Rachel's 20th birthday. Different restaurant, different cake. Another click. Her 21st. Balloons behind her, gifts on the table, Mom and Dad smiling beside her. My aunt slowly lowered her glass. Rachel stared at the screen. You found all of them. Enough of them. Dad pushed his chair back. Turn that off. No. His expression hardened. Mirriam, I said turn it off. And every year, you told me birthdays weren't worth celebrating. Mom jumped in. These were small exceptions. You're deliberately making this look worse than it was. I changed the screen again. A photograph appeared beside 2 dates. My 23rd birthday was 11 days before this picture. Mom said nothing. You told me that year we couldn't afford a $20 cake. I pointed toward the restaurant photograph. 11 days later, you paid for Rachel's birthday dinner. My aunt looked directly at Mom. Helen, why would you tell one daughter birthdays were pointless while celebrating the other? Mom's jaw tightened. Because Mirriam was different. I almost smiled. How? She was mature. Rachel was younger. Rachel cared about those things. There it was. The excuse I'd heard in different forms my entire life. Because I didn't scream, I could be ignored. Because I didn't demand, I could receive less. Because I learned to hide disappointment, everyone decided I didn't experience it. Dad stood. Enough. This is our anniversary. Whatever problem Mirriam has, we'll discuss it privately after the weekend. Then he turned toward me and held out his hand. Give me the room keys. Mom folded her arms, apparently relieved that Dad had taken control again. Exactly. We've all had enough drama for one evening. I set the remote on the table. Then I looked directly at my father. There aren't any room keys. Mom stared at me. What do you mean there aren't any room keys? I mean I didn't book you a suite. For a second, she actually laughed. You're joking. No. Dad's hand slowly dropped. What exactly did you book? This room, dinner, that's what I promised. Mom's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. You brought us to a luxury hotel just to humiliate us. I invited you to an anniversary gathering. You decided that meant suites, spa treatments, and an expensive weekend. You knew what we expected. That sentence landed harder than she intended. I nodded. Yes, I did. The room went quiet again. For years, I knew exactly what it felt like to expect one small sign that my birthday mattered and get nothing. Tonight, you walked into this hotel expecting something because you assumed your celebration deserved my money. Dad looked around at our relatives. This should have remained private. It was private for years. I reached into my bag and removed several printed pages. But you made sure of that. I placed them on the table. Rachel leaned forward. What are those? Screenshots, receipts, messages. Earlier in the hallway, after I confronted Rachel, she'd finally shown me the family group chat I'd never been included in. The birthday dinners hadn't been spontaneous exceptions. They had been planned. I slid one screenshot toward Rachel. Her eyes moved across it, then stopped. Mom recognized it immediately. Rachel, why did you give her that? Rachel didn't answer. My aunt picked up another copy. The message had been sent by Mom years earlier, while they were arranging one of Rachel's birthday dinners. Don't post the pictures publicly. Mirriam will start asking why we don't do anything for hers. Rachel looked up. Mom. Mom opened her mouth, but nothing came out. There was no longer any way to claim. I'd been too mature to care. They'd known I would care. They'd simply made sure I wouldn't find out. I picked up the envelope I'd placed beside Mom earlier and pushed it toward her. She tore it open. Inside was a list. Anniversary gifts. Restaurant deposits. Holiday contributions. Family expenses. All the things I'd kept helping to pay for, while being told celebrations were wasteful whenever they involved me. At the bottom, I'd written one final line. Effective today, $0. Mom looked up sharply. Before she could speak, Rachel pushed her chair back. Her eyes stayed fixed on the old group chat message. Then she interrupted. Mom, tell everyone why you wanted Mirriam kept out. Mom didn't answer Rachel immediately. She folded the screenshot once, then unfolded it, as if delaying long enough might somehow change what she'd written. Mom, Rachel said again, why? Dad sank back into his chair. Finally, Mom spoke. It started when Mirriam was a teenager. I didn't interrupt. Her birthday always seemed to fall when we had other expenses. School costs, family obligations, bills. Rachel was younger and she made a bigger deal about birthdays. Rachel stared at her. So you celebrated mine and lied to Mirriam. Mom's voice tightened. We weren't trying to hurt anyone. But you knew it would hurt me, I said, pointing at the screenshot. That's why you told everyone to hide the pictures. That ended the argument. Dad rubbed his forehead. What had started as convenience had turned into a family rule. Instead of admitting they didn't want to spend equally on both daughters, my parents decided birthdays were childish and wasteful. But only when the birthday was mine. And because I rarely complained, the lie became easier every year. I thought Mirriam understood, Dad finally said. Understood what? He couldn't answer. I looked around the table. A few months ago, I accidentally saw one of Rachel's birthday pictures. That's when I started looking more closely. Tonight wasn't about embarrassing anyone. I brought everyone here because every time this happened privately, I was told I was sensitive, dramatic, or remembering things incorrectly. Rachel pushed the screenshots away. I really thought you knew about some of the dinners. I didn't. She swallowed. I should have noticed. I nodded. You didn't create the rule, Rachel, but you benefited from it, and pretending you didn't see the difference helped it continue. Her eyes dropped. I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. There were no excuses attached to it. And that mattered. Mom wasn't finished. We gave you everything you actually needed, Mirriam. I looked at her. That's the problem. You decided I only deserved what I needed, while everyone else was allowed to be wanted. Nobody rescued her from that sentence. For once, Dad didn't tell me to respect my mother. My aunt didn't change the subject. Rachel didn't defend them. The evidence was sitting on the table. Mom eventually looked toward the hotel lobby, beyond the doors. "So what happens now? We just leave? You can stay if you want." Her expression shifted. "You said there weren't rooms." "I said I didn't book your room. If you want a suite, you can pay for one." Dad gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "So this whole weekend was never happening?" "No." I picked up the dinner bill. "I promised an anniversary gathering. I'm paying for this dinner because that's the gift I agreed to give you, nothing more." Mom looked at the expense sheet again. "And this. That starts tonight too. No more automatic restaurant deposits. No more expensive anniversary gifts, because everyone assumed dependable Mirriam would cover the difference. No more family emergencies that somehow became my responsibility, simply because I was the one least likely to say no." The change didn't destroy my family overnight. It did something more realistic. It changed the rules. After that dinner, relatives stopped automatically volunteering my money and time. When Mom tried to describe the hotel confrontation as me being too sensitive, there were too many people who had seen the photographs and messages themselves. Rachel and I didn't suddenly become perfect sisters either. She had work to do. But she did it. She stopped making excuses for what happened, and over the following months, she started showing up without being asked. Then my 28th birthday arrived. I didn't book a ballroom. I didn't need a luxury hotel. I invited a small group of people who consistently showed up for me, including Rachel. There was dinner. There was cake. And when everyone started singing, I caught myself waiting for the old feeling, the part of me that wondered whether Mom and Dad had remembered. It never came. They weren't automatically invited into my life anymore. If they wanted a closer relationship, it would require accountability, not obligation. For years, I'd been the daughter who gave more because everyone assumed I'd ask for less. That ended in the same luxury hotel, where my parents arrived expecting me to prove how much their anniversary mattered. Instead, I finally proved something to myself. My family spent years teaching me that my birthday wasn't worth celebrating, so I finally stopped giving them the power to decide what I was worth.